Hello there. Welcome to Restoration Messianic Fellowship and the Counting of the Omer 2026. Let's start off with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzavanu al sefarat ha'omer. Blessed are you, O Adonai our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and has commanded us concerning the counting of the Omer. Again, we are almost done. Today is the 48th day, which is 6 weeks and 6 days of the Omer. It says, Hayom Shemona Barbaim Yom Shechem Shesha Shavuot Veshisha Yamim LaOmer. All right, so we have been going through some of the additional statements on our statement of beliefs, and we did anti-Semitism first, then we talked about replacement theology yesterday. I'm trying to get through at least to the next few, because we've really only got today and tomorrow left before we get to Shavuot, which is the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. It's amazing to think the Jewish people had been celebrating Pentecost for almost 1,500 years before Acts chapter 2, and we act like it just came along and popped up there as if we invented it half the time. Don't get me on that little sidebar. But this third statement of just these additional concepts is on the state of Israel, which is in the news a lot, and people's opinions of it have changed a lot in recent days. It says, the modern state of Israel is a continuation of God's promise to gather his people to the land. And that's again, that's part of the rejection of replacement theology. It says their continued existence over the centuries, despite numerous attempts to expel or eradicate them, is proof of God's faithfulness, that he is still keeping his promises. That Satan continues to make this relatively small percentage of the world's population the number one target for abuse and annihilation is also proof of their ongoing significance. In other words, if they weren't important in any way, Satan would just leave them alone. They have no significance. They're not involved in anything that God is doing. Why would he target them any more than anybody else? But he clearly does. But it goes on, it says, but Adonai will never break his promise or covenant with them. Even those who could be described as hostile to the gospel are still loved on account of the patriarchs, because God has made some promises. So the calling and the many blessings given to the Jewish people, things like that Paul lists in Romans, the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the Torah, the temple service, and all those promises are irrevocable, and they continue. It is true that the modern state of Israel is not perfect, nor are its laws and leadership always reflective of the Torah and Adonai's instructions. But that does not negate God's promise any more than previous wicked kings or rulers did. I mean, you go back, you read the scriptures, there all the time there are wicked kings and rulers, and God disciplines them. But that never means he stops caring for them, loving them, trying to restore and renew them. So even when sent out to exile, God has promised to always preserve a remnant of his people, and he has always promised to return them to their inheritance. Their presence in the land is a necessary element of the return of Messiah Yeshua in power and glory. So that is one of the most common prophetic statements, is that essentially, I will gather my people and bring them back. And that is an ongoing thing, and we've seen it even fulfilled in our day. And their presence in the land is a necessary element of the return of the Messiah. When you get to that statement where it talks about that the Jews, when Messiah returns, there's that statement of, I'm not going to drink this again until you say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Y'all excuse me, I don't know why my throat's all of a sudden troubling. But blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That happens, that declaration And that recognition, you get to see a glimpse of that on Palm Sunday, but that was also supposed to be something said of the temple leadership uh, in recognition of the arrival of the king. And so that happens on a feast day, that happens in the temple from the leadership recognizing him. So their presence there in the land is an important and necessary part of that. And so, again, that doesn't mean, even though we're talking about Israel and its right to the land, its right to exist, its right to defend itself. No, that is all that Zionism really is the right to exist as a people in the land that is their traditional home. I mean, they are not colonizers. Islam and the Arabs built stuff on top of the Jewish foundations, and so they have a right to be there. They have a right to self-governance. They have a right to defending themselves. And so, no, they are not perfect. The government is not perfect in any way. Uh, well, in many ways they are, but not in every way. How about that? But at the same time, um, they really haven't ever been, in that sense, a perfect shining example of Torah keeping. And yet God will always keep his promise, because it's not based upon the performance of the people, it is based upon the promise of God. That's a significant thing. We're looking at it as if it's performative. All the ones that are criticizing Israel and saying we don't want to have anything to do with them, we're making it about performance. And that's never been the standard. I'm going to read this next one quickly as well, so we can move on to the one after that tomorrow. But this is one I've talked about before multiple times. It's practices based on anti-Semitism. And so, should the modern church continue in decisions and practices if anti-Semitism was a significant deciding factor? That's an important thing that we have to look at when we're looking at church history. Why we do the things that we do and practice the things that we do. If anti-Semitism is one of the primary reasons why they made the decision the way they did, are we comfortable continuing in that decision? So restoration is not comfortable continuing such practices and seeks to return to the first century practice of the faith. To help with this conviction, it is important to ask two questions when evaluating church history and practice. First, if something is described or commanded in the scriptures for the people of God to do, so there's a command, my people will do this, but we're not doing that today, why are we not? And when did we stop? Secondly, if something is described or commanded in the scriptures for the people of God not to do, as in, don't do the things of the nations, don't worship me like that. So if there are negative commands that he says, don't do this, and we are doing those things today in our practice of the faith, why are we doing it, and when did we start? And oftentimes the answer to that question in both counts, many times the answer to that question is anti-Semitism. We don't like the Jews. We don't want to be connected to the Jews. We don't want to do anything associated with the Jews. So we're going to now change something and do it this way. So these clarifying questions often reveal heartbreaking moments in our history that has led to horrible persecution of the Jewish people, all in the name of Christ. And that is a horrible and tragic testimony. And it's one of the main reasons why many Jewish people are unwilling to read the New Testament today for themselves. That's why they're not willing to consider him as Messiah, is because, well, if he's really our Messiah, why would his followers treat us this way? So it has led to horrible persecution of the Jewish people, and as a result, the Jewish people have been further hardened to resist efforts to introduce them to their Messiah. So basically, we are poor evangelists for our King. because of how we treat the Jewish people. And of course, nations will be judged based upon how they treat Israel and the Jewish people. And so it is a tragic thing what we have done. And even, there's unintended consequences to our theology in many respects. The way we talk about Yeshua and the Torah, the way we say that, we don't have to do those things. We can throw off the feast days. We can throw off the law. We can throw off things like the food laws and things like that. By doing that, we have turned Yeshua into a false prophet in the eyes of the Jewish people, and that's despite the miracles that he has done. Deuteronomy 13 gives a test for a prophet or a someone who dreams dreams or claims to speak for God. He says, even if they do miracles and signs and wonders, but they tell you to go and follow out and go after other gods and worship them, gods that you have not known. They said specifically, do not listen to that false prophet and dreamer of dreams, even with their miracles. And to go after and serve other gods is basically to worship them, but it's to have other ways than God's ways, another law other than God's law, another Torah other than God's Torah, because the Torah represents the character and the law of the king. And loyal subjects only follow the law of one king. And if you're going off and following another law, another Torah, other than his, you are worshiping and serving another God. So we have made him into a false prophet in the eyes of traditional Judaism. And much of the things that you hear Christians and others criticize about Judaism, about the rabbis, about the Talmud, about all the junk that's going out there, many times those things that they are criticizing their decisions on the Jewish side were often made in response to and in rejection to the Christian persecution that was coming their way. So even rabbinic Judaism and some of the changes and decisions that they have made over the centuries are in response to us and our mistreatment of them. So even traditional Christianity is not the same that it was in the first century, and traditional Judaism is not the same that it was in the first century, because we have been in conflict so much. Rather than being one new man, we've gone our separate ways, and then we've kind of reacted to one another. And so it's our own fault that we're here in a lot of ways. And we have made many decisions based upon rejection of the Jewish people, and that's not something we should continue in as the people of God, especially as we approach the time of his coming, and the goal being that Jew and Gentile will be united together as one new man. If that's the goal, let's start taking steps to get there. All right, and with that, I'm going to close this down. May the Lord bless y'all and give you shalom. Amen.